I thought, well, we pretty much have everything available to us electronically. So I have a few things that I'm going to pass to Jim, which if that ever comes up, you'll have all the notes and so forth. And then I've put it together a packet of information for somebody who might run for my position in another year and a half or so. Let's see. First off, I just would like to say that a large group of us attended the final annual GK-12 conference in Washington, D.C. I went, Vaughn Shepard joined us, the project manager. We had 4 teachers from Crestview, a teacher from Manhattan, and then a couple of our graduate students. And Vaughn and I attended a really interesting session, and all the sessions I went to revolved around using IT in the classroom. And the particular one that we went to was presented by a high school teacher who uses Twitter in a really interesting way. He has students Twitter something every day about what they've done in the classroom. He says that really helps with the shy kids to, get them to be able to engage with him. They've been using something called Science Pond, where they've actually managed to get in contact with scientists around the world about topics. And so now once a month they have a Twitter conversation with scientists worldwide on topics such as animal rights, evolution. You can see they're sort of maybe a little bit controversial or interesting, but and then students from around the world, and they're interacting right now with students from Pakistan, which I thought was really interesting. Then there was another session on iPads, and I know Fran mentioned Bear Creek, and I know in the district we have 2 pilot schools that are using iPads in the classroom. And then I attended another session about where these graduate students were working with students in Ohio on text-to-speech dialogue on student research. So these were students that are doing their science projects, like science fair projects, and then what they do is they go around and they interview friends and family members about their project, and they take all the questions that they have brought up, and then they type in a text in something called Extra Normal, which then you get to pick avatars and what accent they want and so forth, and then they make a little movie about their science project. And they have found that this really helps them get prepared for when they're speaking to the scientists or the engineers who are questioning them about their research, because they've really had a chance to think deeply, write this dialogue, and then to actually get questions integrated in and think about how to answer those questions. So, there's a lot of neat things going on, and I'm sure within our district too, and I'm just wondering if at one point we could get some sort of update on how we're integrating technology into the classroom here, if it's just sort of a, whatever teacher that might think something's interesting, or if we actually have a plan, because I know we've got a new educational technology person, right, in the district. So there's obviously a lot of really neat things going on, and the kids seem to get really engaged using all these different pieces of technology, and teachers may or may not know the best ways how to use the technology. So I would like to get that at one point. And then the other thing that some of us attended was the Legacy Foundation, Colorado Legacy Foundation luncheon, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something. And of course, this is headed up by Helene Jones, who started it 3 years ago as a single employee on a $250,000 budget. They've just hired their 27th employee, and they have a $9.5 million budget, and they're doing really great work. And I know Roy and some other folks attended the day-long workshops. But the beginning of the luncheon, they had a really neat video that they put together, and it's sort of thinking outside the box of education, of, does it need to be brick walls tied to the day that we have and the school year that we have and so forth. And Helene said that they're trying to get it viral. So if anyone's interested, go to the website. It's right up there on front, and send it off to friends, because they really want to get that around. We also had a really interesting speaker, and I can't remember Miller. I know was his last name. I can't remember what his first name. Do you remember, Bruce? He's written a couple books, and they asked him to be somewhat provocative in his talk. And it was interesting because he focused strictly on the educator, nothing to do about the Common Core standards or whatever. And he talked about how in the schools that are doing very well educationally, Finland, South Korea, Singapore, the 100% of the teachers come from the top third of high school graduates. And he said in the US, we get 24% of the top third. And then if you're in a Title I school, you get about 4% of the top third of high school graduates. And he really talked about how we need to change that percentage and make being an educator more prestigious. In South Korea, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a teacher. They're all prestigious, well-paid positions, and he said, 150,000 is sort of the top tier of the salary. And he doesn't have any answers as far as how we might move towards this direction, but he really feels that, and I know Bruce feels this way too, we want an excellent educator in every classroom, and the way to do that is to make the career more prestigious and make it more professional. And so that I just found it really interesting hearing his talk and seeing sort of his spin on things. And then just the last thing I want to say is Shelley and I have been working on the evaluation subcommittee for the contract, and this is all sort of parcel and package with, good educators, professionalizing and so forth, and we've had some good discussions, and I look forward to our last 3 days of meeting and having our, hopefully, closing statement and contract on Saturday. So thank you, Bruce, for bringing that into our district. It's been great so far.
Jenny? Well, I'd like to give a shout out to Lynn Jackson's 5th grade class and Amy Ambacher's 3rd grade class, who were kind enough to invite me to read last week. Or was it this week, to their class. I really had a good time, but I mention it because I know that every once in a while you'll hear some concern about how testing in our school districts is robbing our classrooms of their critical, that we're all teaching to the test, and so we're robbing our kids of the opportunity for imaginative instruction or developing critical thinking skills. And I'd like to say that what I saw going on in those classrooms puts the light of that totally. I was really pleased with the imaginative work I saw going on, and also the engaged kids who seem to love learning. So here in Boulder Valley, I think we can be proud about that. The other thing that I did yesterday was I went to the Broomfield Community Foundation's Heart of Broomfield Award, and they recognize they give an award for it's called for education, participation in the education system every year. And the woman who won the award is a volunteer who goes in 1 day a week and has now for a number of years to the Broomfield Counseling Office and helps children or students there sort of navigate the whole college application, how do I find scholarships and thing, and which has been really a real treasure for Broomfield. Several of the other, and I mention this because I just want to talk about not just Broomfield, but the way our community supports our schools. Several of the other award winners had involvement in our schools as part of their resume, or one of the reasons they were getting awards. And that's the case every year with the Broomfield Heart of Broomfield Awards. And but it's true in all of our districts. I love the way that the foundation supports education, not only our Impact Foundation, but the Broomfield Community Foundation, and I know other businesses and things support education in our district with their gifts and time. And I just think it's really important. Our schools couldn't be the quality schools they are without that kind of involvement from our community. So, so again, Broomfield is wonderful, but I'm sure it's not just Broomfield. All of our communities in our district are that supportive. So thank you out there, those of you who have been supportive to our districts. And then I'd like to thank the students who came out tonight to speak on behalf of their teacher at New Vista High School. We're always glad to hear from you. And congratulations to Bailey, who's a terrific skier, and congratulations to the Impact Award-winning teachers, without whom none of this would work at all.
Thank you. Sam?
We heard a lot tonight about how teachers can inspire students, and I thank the kids from New Vista for coming out and sharing their feelings about their teacher, and also echo what everybody has said about the Impact Award winners. Although they didn't speak tonight, all 5 award winners spoke very eloquently, and each of them in a little different way about their teaching style at the award event. And I just found it very inspiring, and feel privileged to be in a district that has those teachers in it, and so many other inspiring teachers. And Tom and I have been doing the work on the Payroll and Benefits Subcommittee, and I just commend the work that Leslie and Bill from the administration have been doing, and the work of the association representatives, because we're making a lot of progress on what are very challenging issues.
So it's good to get back and see all you guys again. We've had a long spring break and over Easter now, so it seems like it's been a long time. Nice tan that you have there, Leslie. I also want to echo all the thanks of all the other board members, but I particularly would like to recognize the students that came forward and spoke tonight. It takes a lot of poise at that age particularly to come forward and to talk and give a speech basically, and trying to influence outcomes. And we're a public board. We're elected by the public, and we represent them. So I always value that and value the input, and particularly when students come forward. So thank you guys so much for coming forward. As Sam mentioned, we've been spending quite a bit of time as a group, not only as a board, but BVEA and administration, and looking at a number of issues associated with our contract, and Sam and I have been on the payroll and benefits part of that, and spent a good deal of time looking at the current salary schedule we have. It's been in place for probably over 20 years, modified multiple times over that, such that it really does not make a lot of logical sense right now in the way it's constructed. So we've had some very rich discussions around what's important about the salary schedule, and recognizing experience and recognizing education for our teachers. So this has been a very, very good exercise. I hope that we can continue it in the future for future negotiations. There are just a lot of issues, as you can imagine, that we're trying to work through, and I'm looking forward hopefully to come into agreement and with this year, and making improvements in our contract with the BVEA and all of our employment groups for that matter. There's still a number of open issues associated with how we fund things, which reminds me, Bruce, thanks for sharing with us that this is the first time in the last 3 years that it appears that we're not going to get a cut in revenue. Now, doesn't appear we're going to gain any ground. If we do, it's very slight. And so we're very far behind where we should be with Amendment 23. But it's good not to have to look at then cutting out an additional $3 or $4 million like we thought with our last work session. So there's a lot on our plate, though. There's a lot on our plate with 191 and other associated issues we have and mandates from the state that are going to be challenging. And what's really challenging, I think, as a board for us is how conservative do we want to be? How aggressive do we want to be in moving forward? Because our last couple of years have really taught us that to have low expectations in revenue from the state. And that's difficult. It's difficult to maintain quality education, to close our achievement gap, to increase our achievement in such an atmosphere. So I encourage all of us to be a little bit more optimistic, maybe take a little bit more risk as we move forward in this budget year. We do have provisions that wisely been put in place with some reserve, such that if we do overflow a bit, we'd have a little bit of a cushion. We have to be careful with that and how we use that. But we certainly don't want to cut things short when it comes to our kids' education. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I guess I'd like to also say congratulations to the Impact Award, Education Award winners. Made me so proud to be in that audience, seeing all the variety of fantastic teachers we had, but even more so, I rotate a daughter every year to go, and every year they come out with a list of all 57 schools that they want to attend next. So it makes my life more fun. They get a glimpse of why I do this, which is to support the gifted educators that we have throughout this district. I also want to applaud the State Senate, who just this week passed the DREAM Act for, I believe, the second year in a row. And it would be nice if the House of Representatives would also step up and also pass this bill, which would give districts like BVSD a positive tool that we can use to boost graduation rates and close the achievement gap. It gives students hope. I was also very happy to see a report by the Colorado Department of Higher Education this weekend. I hope we all got to see that, showing the various college enrollment rates by district. Being a little competitive, I noted that BVSD was only second in the state, but was very proud of the 80% number. 80% of BVSD graduates in 2009 enrolled in college. Well above the state average, and again, I think due to the truly gifted educators that we have, that we see that number. And maybe next year we'll beat out that other school system. So that's all I had to say. So we move to our next item on the agenda, which is an information item on curriculum background. Dr. Messenger?
We could bring up the graphic for Lisa. We could bring that up. So to do a brief introduction to this item, the work that we've started with the curriculum presentations, and we also have another one this evening that will be in the area of language arts, world languages, and theater and drama. One of the things earlier in the semester, I guess, when we were visiting about this, we thought it might be helpful to kind of reframe the pieces a bit, so give it some context. So we created a graphic, and the temptation was to make it incredibly complex. So we kept working to make it more simple than complex. So I just thought it might be informative, and not that this is intended to do anything other than to just provide some context. And if, after I do a brief overview of what's in this graphic, then you may have some questions for clarification, or you may just have some comments or suggestions, and we certainly can, spend more time on any one of these in the future. But I just thought it might give some value as we continue to work through these curriculum adoptions. So if you look at the top of the graphic in the yellow colored shaded boxes, what you'll see at the left box, it says common course state standards and also Colorado academic standards. And so what you recall is that was information that was adopted by our state board for Colorado nearly a year ago, and then in December you took action on the academic standards for our school district. And so those are the yellow boxes are to imply those things that are sort of beyond our scope. And so also in that area is the Colorado English language proficiency standards. And so as we talked about what influences, what are those forces that influence what happens in local school districts, that would be the top tier. So those things that I'd like to think we still influence, but probably don't have as much direct governance over, because they're not in our realm, either in legislative or state board or national level. Then when we get to the second tier of areas that are defined here, we said to ourselves as we designed this, these are the things that wind up in the boardroom. Areas that you have direct responsibility for by statute and out of your interest and commitment to the district. So one of those that we've spent a fair amount of time on, and we'll continue work this evening on, are the the school district's curriculum essential document. So as you know, our curriculum staff, our professional educators with input from a variety of sources created these documents which are being presented to you. They're not new in that we've never had them before, but they're new in that they've been revised in these presentations. You've had described to you those areas that are much the same as they have been in recent years and those things that would be different. And then, again, influenced by our local community. So that is more in our governance here at the school district level, and each district across the state is going through a similar activity. Then the other area that winds up before you and we talk specifically about mathematics. You might recall earlier in the year that there will be materials adoption that will support the revised curriculum that you've approved in mathematics as just one example. And so what is expected in the state of Colorado and in most states is that not only would the governing board approve the curriculum documents, but they would also authorize the investment of district resources to purchase instructional materials to support that curriculum document. So that's in local governance and really is under your jurisdiction as a board. And we believe by your election and by those who might come testify or at least give comment that that's influenced both by our professional staff as well as our community, not just in the design but ultimately in the adoption. And then as we look to what comes next, so this is work that's going on as well right now, is that so you might recall we've talked about we had work across the district in October where we gathered professional staff together in various locations to work on early work around the curriculum essential documents and looking at the state content and district proposed content standards. And then we will on April 20th, so a week from this Friday, is a release day for students, and professional staff will be together once again for a half a day to continue their work. And so this lower level on the chart shows some of the work that is in progress. And so once the standards are embraced by the state and then adopted by the local school districts and curriculum essential documents, then the work is to begin to build what we call curriculum maps, those things that connect areas within the curriculum and across the curriculum so that it's sort of, well, a word I would use is it's the roadmap, it's the greater detail. So if this is generally where we're going, mathematics or whatever the content is, then how do we bring that down to the instructional level? So the lower band are around what we would say school level activity or professional staff level activity. So again, it's not that we haven't had curriculum maps before, but they are under review and revision right now with the recently adopted content standards as well as the curriculum essential documents. And then ultimately, if I'm a third grade teacher or a mathematics teacher or whatever my assignment might be in the district, an art educator, then once we get to that point, I will teach units of study that would be congruent with, complementary to the curriculum essentials document as well as the curriculum maps. So it's bringing it down to greater detail. Then ultimately, as I present in front of children each day as a teacher, it would be expected that I would have lesson plans, that I would have a plan for what I'm going to do during that hour or that morning or multiple mornings or time that I'm with students. And so the notion here is to help see the connection between the more overarching goals from the Common Core standards to the state level to the curriculum essential documents, and eventually these become lessons of instruction. And so with your approval of the curriculum documents, greater detail is brought in through the curriculum mapping, the unit plans, and the lesson plans. We did add the assessment tools because part of what we've been working on within the system is building on what good work's already been done in the past, but being really thoughtful and somewhat systemic about looking at how when we have a curriculum and then we have a map of where we're going and then ultimately unit plans and lesson plans, then as a teacher, how do I collect we'll call it assessment data around the children's performance, the students' performance, so that I can make good choices around redesign of lessons or maintain a really good lesson that has the effect I want it to, or unit plan, or even to influence the curriculum map, and maybe even the curriculum essential documents in time. So when we look at assessment, it can be macro, like a state assessment in mathematics, how well are we doing, and that should inform us, but it's really looking across all districts And so that does inform us, but then we also have levels of assessment, as you know, that can occur within a course of study, like algebra. It could occur in a unit of study within algebra or within biology. And it could be feedback I receive on a real informal basis from the children, from their development of literacy skills, or how things are going within given lessons. And so this feedback loop that should inform professional judgment for our staff around how well our students are doing. That's part of the feedback, how well our students are doing through assessment tools, but also are the unit designs right? Are they, even if we teach them really well and the students seem to grasp what we've taught, does it result in the outcome we expected? So, and that's not an event. Well, we hope it's not an event. We hope it's an ongoing process. Now, a macro assessment, like the National Assessment Educational Progress, only occurs every 4 years, and it's a random selection of students across the country. Well, that's not going to happen all the time, and it informs us as a country, or a state assessment informs us as a state. But we would see complementing that our assessment tools that are used on an ongoing basis, so that professional staff have the data that they need to make judgments around their own lessons and plans. And so, Leslie, your question or comment earlier about the use of technology, the tools of technology, we've talked some about that in the boardroom. We'll talk more about it. But again, as we're introducing new strategies, our curriculum may not have changed, what we're trying to teach, but how we're teaching it changes, and are those instructional strategies having the positive outcomes around student performance we would like, and using technology to assist us in that data collection around student performance. So we didn't want to leave assessment out, because we think it's a really critical part of not just accountability. It is accountability, but it also, as much as accountability, informs us around what we're teaching and how we're teaching it, and the student growth associated with that. I guess the final thing I would say, and then we would welcome questions or comments, is that by design, the top part of the chart would see change less often. That if there's embraced common core standards across the country, maybe a decade or longer that those might be, or there could be refinements. You get to the next level, less frequent. You expressed some concern that seems like we have done this quite a bit lately. So our hope is our curriculum essential documents maybe not be as lasting and as stable as common core standards for the country. So those would be more stable than, or not, they might change more frequently. Review of curriculum and adoption of instructional materials, I guess on a good cycle would be 5 to 7 years, so that we can refresh those. So as we learn things or new content comes about, we don't let it become stagnant. Again, you wouldn't do a total rewrite, but you would refresh those. Some areas of the curriculum require that, maybe more than others. But those would be a little bit more dynamic than the top tier. And then the lower tier, really, by its nature, should be pretty dynamic and really relies on professional judgment, academic choices around the what and the how we teach and how we use that assessment data. So more stable, a little more dynamic, and at the lower level, pretty dynamic indeed, as teachers make decisions around what and how they teach in their classroom. So with that, I will stop. We just thought this might be a graphic representation. Again, we could have made it with a lot more detail and a lot more definitions, but we thought keeping it simple might be good, just so that we can, at a glance, kind of see how the pieces fit together. And again, this is just working with the curriculum administrators, Ellen and myself. We just thought this would be a starting point at least. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would stop, and if there are questions, I'd be try to answer. We've got other staff here who would chime in. So,
Okay. Comments or questions? Tom?
So thanks. First, let me preface this with being an aerospace engineer. I see charts like this for every program that we do, called requirements flow down or requirements traceability. So I have a tainted view of what these things look like. So please bear with me here. We see these all the time in top-level mission requirements. Go to the space segment, go to a scientific instrument, on down to how we build things. And so we're able to trace back requirements from the very bottom all the way up to the top. So when I look at these, I look at interactions as how things play with other things, and where they're parents and where they're orphans and things. You don't want orphans in a requirements. You like everything to come from something, right? Even though it may be internal and not external. So one of the things that confused me a little bit here was in the green here, where the adopted instructional materials. seem to not come from our curriculum essentials document. Maybe that's not true. I recognize that sometimes there are only certain materials available, and you have to use those to the best of your ability. And so some of your requirements actually may end up coming down from what's available. But I wanted to get a little bit of a thought from you as to how our curriculum essentials documents really drive what materials that we adopt. I think that's the way it goes, although it's not obvious from this chart.
Well, I appreciate the question, Tom, if I could, Jim. I think your observation is absolutely accurate, and I think probably because you look at these things a lot, you probably have a more sophisticated view of how they could be designed. So our attempt here is consistent with what you said, is that it should be, in fact, the curriculum essential documents that would influence the materials that we would select for instruction. And you're right, even in the very best of a textbook adoption, there are going to be areas that it presents that we don't need to teach because it's not in our scope of work we plan to do, and there would be areas most likely that wouldn't be included there, so we would enhance that instruction with other materials from the marketplace or those designed by teachers. So you're absolutely right. That is the flow, and you do the best match you can, knowing then that it isn't perfect. I think our attempt to represent here is that what would influence that, well, ultimately it's a board-level discussion, so that's a district piece, but also what would influence the design of the curriculum essential documents and ultimately the recommendations of what to bring forward to you for the instructional materials would be teachers and community. So more of an influence on those areas. So it doesn't show a direct flow that you're describing, but that would be the intent, Tom. Yes, I think you're absolutely right.
Quick question about sort of how the teaching and learning, sort of accountability at the teaching and learning level. So, for example, curriculum maps. If curriculum maps are developed, are they the same from school to school, or is there some variation in what's being taught from school to school?
So I'm going to start with the response, and I'm going to ask Ellen to add to this if I'm not complete enough or if I'm just not on base. So I think, so we make these look like they're more discrete than they probably are, but just trying to graphically represent them. I think that what we would hope is a curriculum map would give us guidance across buildings, across levels, through a content area like science, that it would in fact do that. That's sort of what binds it together. So more commonality than not with curriculum mapping would be done, recognizing that, and also even with unit plans, a lot of the collaboration within building, especially departments, there might be, especially if educators are teaching the very same courses, they might have common units of study across building, across district. So I think there's a lot of commonality there. Is it restrictive, or could a teacher, with academic freedom, make choices around enhancements of the map or around the unit? The answer would be yes. But I think it is our effort to actualize a commonality, a guaranteed and viable curriculum. These are the pieces that begin to bind that together, not to be lockstep, not to say on the third day of May, this will be the lesson you're doing, but generally, if we want these outcomes in fourth grade mathematics or in algebra, that there would be commonality in the expectations and some commonality in those units and within that map, recognizing that teachers, through their professional judgment, should modify those based on the student learners they have or the pace with which they're going through. So let me stop there, and Ellen, do you want to add?